So this second piece is focused on the flight to Egypt. And the story reads, this is from Matthew chapter 2. When they had departed, behold, the angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream and said, "Rise, take the child and his mother, flee to Egypt and stay there until I tell you. Herod is going to search for the child to destroy him." Joseph rose and took the child and his mother by night and departed for Egypt. He stayed there until the death of Herod, that what the Lord had said through the prophet might be fulfilled. "Out of Egypt I called my son." All right, so put a little parentheses on that for now. The story of the flight to Egypt, we're going to return to it in just a minute. And this is the image for this. And I'm sorry, that's actually the reflection of the light. So if you want to see this image for real, it's in the engineering building at the University of Dayton. This is from the Marion Library Collection. And the artist is Sidney Matias from Brazil. So we'll be right back to this image in a minute. But I'm going to digress. Because I want to share with you my two favorite Marian images. Maria de la Leche, or Maria Lactans, is the image of which I do the majority of my research on Mary. She kind of found me, and that's a whole other story I'm not going to tell you today, but if you'd like, I'll tell you at some point. And as I've done my research on the nursing Madonna, Maria Lactans, Maria de la Leche, I've traveled around to many different places to do this research, and most of the places that I've traveled, there is an image or reference to Our Lady of Sorrows, very closely affiliated. And I am a super fan of Our Lady of Sorrows. I know that's a strange image to be a super fan of, but when I was a child attending CCD, and we're a couple of weeks away from All Saints Day today, so I can tell you this story even more in context. But and religious education, religious formation was called CCD. Many of you probably went through it. So I'm attending CCD back in Texas, and every year for All Saints Day, the teacher would say, "Pick the saint after which you are named." So I'd go home and I'd say, well, who's my saint? And there is no Saint Naomi. She was not made a saint. And there is no Saint Naomi for sure, because my mother dreamt this name, and that's a whole other story too. So I would say, well, who's the saint after which I'm named? And my mother says, well, you're not really named after a saint. I guess if we're going to give you somebody, it's Nuestra Señora de Dolores, because my middle name is Dolores. Well, my mom didn't make the connection to me that Nuestra Señora de Dolores is the same as Mary, the mother of Jesus. To me, in my kid head, there's like all these Marian images, and they weren't necessarily the same Mary that came from the Bible and the gospel stories we heard, but there are all these images in different places, and you have the stained glass windows, so you can look at the stained glass windows. And in my kid head, all of these were kind of separate, kind of together, but it wasn't necessarily the same Mary. And even less, I did not connect it back to Our Lady of Sorrows. I didn't make that connection until I was in my late teens. So I also did not realize that Nuestra Señora de Dolores was the same Mary as the mother of Jesus, who in my kid head was tied, so in my own kid spirituality, popular religiosity, is tied to Diosito, or the little God, who's really baby Jesus. And not to the big head God, right? Like, this is what I'm trying to make sense of. But I'm taking you through this to show you kind of the development in my own life of this relationship with Mary. And really, in my head, the relationship between Mary and the baby Jesus did not necessarily have the closest tie in my kid head to God of the first person, God the Father. And in my kid head, so, I'm about 5 years old at the time, Santa Claus has a much closer relationship because they have some of the same qualities. And the funny part is that I just got into this conversation with somebody a couple of days ago who said, I just heard some kids say that they believe Santa Claus and God are the same person. And this other adult who's talking to me says, that's so ridiculous. And I thought, well, that's what I used to think as a kid. I guess I was a ridiculous kid. I'm not sure when. I'm also not sure when I lost that. So this brings me back to Nuestra Señora de Dolores and Our Lady of Sorrows. And the Catholic Church celebrates the 7 sorrows of Mary. And you actually have one of them, Mary at the cross, in that middle window over there. And so the suffering of Mary, but the other part of that is that the flight to Egypt is also one of the sorrows of Mary. And she, why would we say that the flight to Egypt is one of the sorrows of Mary? So she's leaving everything she knows, her home, her roots, her family. What else might it be a sorrow? Fear of the unknown. Well, she had the baby, but it's a very young baby. I saw a hand over here. They are afraid for their lives. They are fearing, fleeing, afraid for their lives, and they are refugees. They are seeking refuge out of fear for their lives. So I told you that my breast milk research is based, my Mary research is based on Mary and breast milk. And it's based largely on a Mexican figure, a Mexican convent nun from the 17th century. Her name is Sor Maria Ana Águeda de San Ignacio. I don't expect you to know that, to remember it, but just, she's pretty cool. And she writes about Mary's relationship with breast milk and that the path of milk, or the Milky Way, is the way to God. And Maria Ana says that God could have chosen any way to bring about salvation. God did not need to become human, but God chose to become human and chose to do it through the natural way, through a woman's body. So tying that back to the flight to Egypt, it's Mary's body that is tied to Jesus' body, and because it's so closely tied, they're fleeing. And the image of Nuestra Señora de Dolores was actually born out of the story of the flight to Egypt. So it's believed that there's a shrine outside of Bethlehem, and it's called the Milk Grotto. And there are these 3 rocks they're stones, and they're solid white. And it's believed that Mary's breast milk, they had to stop for Mary to nurse Jesus on the way out of Bethlehem on their way to Egypt. And some of her breast milk dropped on these stones. So people now go to this shrine to ask for miracles, and many times special favors and miracles, deeds are granted. when people go there. But this shrine was created, or the popular religious belief is that it happened because of the flight to Egypt, because they were refugees, because they were fleeing for their life. And just what an incredible thing that this space of something so natural of needing to nurse a child, to continue to nurture and grow, is happening out of this space of life of extreme turmoil and suffering and pain, in the space where Mary is both Maria Lactans and Our Lady of Sorrows. She's María de la Leche y Nuestra Señora de Dolores. And so it's just a fascinating thing to think about, that out of the biggest struggles of life is where some of the places that continue to grow and nurture may come. Now, I don't want to make the struggles of life seem like, oh, there's always something great that comes from it, because the struggles of life and the sadness of life and the hardship and suffering of life could just lead to that, more suffering, struggles, and hardship and sadness. But just to think about that, in this space where people still return, the Milk Grotto is a space that is believed happened because of this story of the flight to Egypt, where Mary and Joseph and Jesus were refugees, where they were fleeing for their lives, where they were scared and all alone and leaving everything they knew, everything that was holy and sacred. And luckily they found sanctuary in Egypt. They found, and so we hear the word sanctuary a lot today. Where have you heard the word sanctuary? Church, because a church has a sanctuary. So it's a holy place, the holiest of holies. Where else do you hear the word sanctuary? In the news, what did somebody say? In cities? Right, so sanctuary cities. So it's also a place of extending hospitality and home and safety. I think some of you are starting to make connections back to your dirt now. So look back at your dirt, and why we asked you to bring it, because it should be also of a place of sanctuary, of a place of protection, which is the word refuge, protection and shelter. And so when people are refugees, when Mary and Joseph and Jesus are refugees in the flight to Egypt, they are looking for shelter, but they are also looking for safety and a place to be. And Father Satish told me that something really awful happened in this parish to the Marian Grotto. What happened? It was destroyed. It was desecrated. The Marian Grotto outside was desecrated, and people brought some sort of ill intention to it with unknown reasons. Yet a place that was made to be safer and prayerful was disrupted. And those of you who are from this parish, how did that make you feel? Hurt? Angry? What else? Sad? Senseless? Why would someone do this? It doesn't make sense.
Somebody said violated.
Oh, violated. So feeling unsafe or needing to have a place be safe and holy and of sanctuary doesn't necessarily mean that we need to flee from somewhere. It can happen anywhere, really, that that notion of feeling violated that makes us angry and sad and hurt. And that's probably, those are the things that Mary and Joseph and Jesus are feeling on their flight to Egypt. And it's also the things that people, the very many refugees from around the world, are feeling, because most of the people who choose to migrate do not migrate as just a free choice, but are fleeing some sort of violence or trouble in their life, and are looking for safety and shelter and sanctuary and refuge. And as the Air Force dirt says, or symbolizes, that we can create that, and we find safe places in different ways, and we help to create that by our relationships, going back to the first talk, and the people who surround us. We too can create that with the dirt we bring. And hopefully here, I've heard this parish even before I came for the first time just a few months ago, is a place where many people feel safer and more at home. And it's a place of protection from danger and a place of sacredness and holiness. So, if you let me, here I'm going to do a little bit of mixing too. The makers of nativity scenes, creches, Hallmark, whoever, when you buy a nativity scene, what does it have in it? Mary, Jesus, Joseph. What else does it have? Shepherds, a donkey, and animals, a manger, and 3 wise men. So you have a mixture of the infancy narratives from the gospel. So we're about to do that with Mary and the stories. We're going to mix the Magnificat of Luke with the flight to Egypt of Matthew, just for the sake of today and the whole next year, because you guys get to carry this forward. But in the Magnificat, Mary says, "You have shown strength with your arm. You have scattered the proud in their conceit. You have deposed the mighty from their thrones and raised the lowly to high places. You have filled the hungry with good things, while you have sent the rich away empty. You have come to the aid of Israel, your servant, mindful of your mercy, the promise you made to our ancestors, to Sarah and Abraham and the descendants forever." So being mindful that both Matthew and Luke are talking about these places both of people suffering and God attending to people's suffering. That's what you can get out of this part of the Magnificat. And you can also get that out of the story of the flight to Egypt. One, Jesus is made to suffer just like every other human being because of our sinful human condition. But that is also, there's the possibility of making that, attending to that in some ways. It's not going to make life easy or perfect, but it allows for some sort of safer space, a space of refuge, a space of sanctuary.